Right at the moment the vows were about to be spoken, the groom Daniel Hayes suddenly let go of the bride's hands and walked straight off the altar, leaving more than 300 guests frozen as if they had just witnessed an on-stage accident. No one breathed. No one understood what was happening. And then everyone saw it. He was walking toward a black woman in a simple black dress seated in the very last row. Maya Rivers. The silence instantly cracked into a wave of bewildered gasps, confusion spilling through every pair of eyes and every fractured inhale. Sterling Plaza, the most luxurious hotel in Manhattan, had never seen a disruption this bold in its entire history. Before the rising whispers could even form, Daniel's words dropped like a thunderclap, shattering every layer of icy composure worn by the upper crust of society. "Yes, ma'am. Yes, boss." The last two words tore out of him with a choked urgency that seemed to pull all the oxygen from the room. Olivia Sterling, the bride, in her intricate lace wedding gown, stood stunned lips, trembling her face, drained of color, as if someone had splashed her with winter water. The groom's mother shot upright, her hand gripping her metallic clutch so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Several high-profile finance executives abruptly straightened their expressions, shifting from bored to electrified, as though a secret stock code had just been exposed in front of them. But the one most shaken was Ethan Sterling, the bride's brother, Maya's boyfriend, a tech billionaire accustomed to market volatility, yet completely unprepared for this kind of emotional earthquake. His heart twisted sharply, a single painful beat that made him feel as if the world had shifted direction, and he was the last one to realize it. In front of him stood Daniel, a man the media often praised for building a startup, valued in the hundreds of millions, now bowing his head to Maya as if she were a symbol. Maya said nothing. She did not step back. She did not hide her discomfort. She allowed it to wash over her like a cold wind, sinking into every breath. She felt hundreds of eyes piercing through her, not looking at her like a wedding guest, but like a mystery whose first layer had just been peeled back. In that moment, the past she had spent years burying stirred awake and slammed against the tranquility she had built for herself in Brooklyn. Maya Rivers, the woman the Sterling family had been scrutinizing all evening, was no longer just Ethan's simple girlfriend. Old fear rose within her, but it could not overpower the calm she had earned after years of running from the spotlight. Daniel remained where he was unfazed by the thousands of eyes threatening to crush him. You are the one who saved my company," he said, his voice trembling like a taut string, yet clear on every syllable. "Rivers Capital. I sent out hundreds of desperate emails. Only one person replied. Ah," voices rippled across the ballroom. "Rivers Capital impossible. She's Rivers doesn't. Rivers Capital only fund projects with national impact. Don't tell me she is the one behind that fund." Maya closed her eyes for a single breath, accepting the inevitable. Ethan stood frozen. His arms hung at his sides, his heartbeat pounding so loud he could hear himself. A part of him hurt because no one had told him the truth, but a bigger part drowned in awe, disbelief, and a tidal wave of emotion so intense it strangled his voice. Olivia had become nothing more than a shadow. Every glance, every thread of attention had abandoned her and converged onto the woman she had dismissed from the very beginning. Olivia's face turned crimson with rage and humiliation. She screamed, "Daniel, what are you doing?" But her voice was swallowed by the growing storm of murmurs. Daniel did not look at her. He did not look at anyone except Maya. He straightened his voice, suddenly firm and resonant like a vow. "Without you, I would have lost everything. Today here, everything I have is because of you." The statement ripped apart the masks worn by the wealthy figures seated under the gilded ceiling. Under the blazing lights, Maya suddenly felt she was not the center of attention, but the center of truth. A truth she had run from for years. A truth this elite world was never prepared to swallow, a truth that turned a multi-million-dollar wedding into a stage for karma. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low shaken, carrying hurt, anger, love, and the collapse of every assumption he once held. "Maya, what is this?" The way he said her name, trembling honest, lost cut straight into the most fragile part of her. In that suspended heartbeat, Maya could only manage one sentence, soft as a breath, yet heavy as the sky. "I did not want this to happen here." And with that single line, Sterling Plaza seemed to crumble, not because the secret had been exposed, but because a deeper truth had begun to take shape. The truth that a person's worth is never defined by the dress they wear or the family they come from, but by what they do in silence, the things no one ever sees, until truth unlocks its own door. And today, that door had opened. On a quiet morning, many weeks before that chaotic wedding, when Manhattan was still drowsy after a long night of cold neon lights, Maya Rivers curled into her favorite corner of willow and ink, where faded brick walls and warm golden lamps wrapped everything in a rare kind of peace. Here she was not the hidden name behind billion-dollar deals, not the center of speculation or greedy expectations, but simply a woman in a soft gray sweater, absorbed in an old book still carrying the scent of paper and time. The wine-colored armchair held her like the embrace of an old friend, and the steaming cup of black coffee offered the only warmth she allowed into her mornings. Across from her sat Ethan Sterling, the man the media adored as the Prince of New York tech, yet he looked detached from the glamorous world he had been born into. His perfectly tailored navy suit, his cold silver watch, and the handsome face that filled financial magazines were softened by the warm amber light that existed only in cafes like this. His body rested loosely, as if this place were a glass sanctuary, protecting him from the relentless demands of wealth, a place where he could just be Ethan, not a Sterling. The silence between them was not empty, but a private language, a rhythm understood by two lonely souls, since the first day they met running from the spotlight, one running from the shadow of his own family. That morning, Maya was reading a book on architecture, an art she loved, the way buildings told stories through structure instead of words, and she softly said, "He wrote that architecture is music frozen in place. So what kind of music would a human life be?" Ethan. The question was as gentle as the scent of coffee, yet the moment it fell into the air, the entire cafe seemed to slow. Ethan looked up, his brown eyes quietly studying Maya's face under the window light, as if trying to see through the calm armor she always wore. "Some lives are symphonies," he said, his voice unexpectedly deep and tender, loud, brilliant, demanding to be heard. "But some lives are a single, perfect note, small, quiet, but unforgettable." Maya smiled, the kind of smile that touched just the corner of her lips like a small punctuation mark on a score. It was warm enough to melt into someone's heart, but fragile enough to disappear the moment anything touched it too hard. And right then, the phone on the table vibrated, slicing through the calm like a sharp blade across still water. Ethan glanced at the screen, and Maya saw the shift in his eyes, from serenity to tension in a single breath. "My mother is calling," he whispered, as if afraid of breaking the delicate space between them. His voice dropped the moment he answered, becoming a soft, defensive tone Maya had heard from many wealthy people whenever they spoke to the true power in their lives. Family. He spoke in short, hesitant phrases, as if needing to reassure someone while shrinking into himself. Maya could not hear Victoria Sterling's words from the other end, but she heard the melody of pressure, sharp, scrutinizing, demanding, judgmental. Mum, she does not work in finance, yes. Her family is good. Each word Ethan spoke fell like a shard of glass into the silence between them. Maya tried to return to her book, but the words blurred, not because she did not understand them, but because she understood too well. A woman like Victoria Sterling did not call just to make polite conversation. She was evaluating Maya, weighing her, measuring her worth with the cold ruler of the upper class. When Ethan ended the call, the air around them stretched heavy and taut. He sat quietly for a long time before pulling a thick ivory envelope from his suit pocket, embossed with the Sterling Plaza logo, the hotel the family partly owned. "My sister is getting married," he said slowly, as if each word stepped onto fragile ground. "I want you to come with me." But Maya did not need to hear the rest. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the fear he tried to hide beneath gentle composure, the fear that his family would use polite-sounding but poisonous words to cut into her like 1,000 thin blades. "They are not intentionally cruel," Ethan whispered, "but they are used to placing standards on everyone. I am afraid they will hurt you." Maya's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the honesty in his gaze. He was not ashamed of her. He was trying to protect her in the only way he knew, clumsy but real. She placed her hand on his soft but firm, anchoring the part of him that trembled. "Ethan," she said quietly, her voice gentle as rain, yet carrying the weight of all the years she had lived behind an anonymous mask. "I am not made of glass." And that was the one truth Ethan had never known about her. She was not fragile in his world. She simply had no desire to live in it. But for Ethan, she was willing to step into it, even knowing the challenges ahead were ones he could not yet see. When Maya left Willow and Ink that evening, a thin layer of mist had settled over the streetlights, softening everything along the Brooklyn sidewalks, yet making the air strangely colder. She walked slowly, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, feeling the echo of her conversation with Ethan still lingering in her chest like a small but steady pulse. What surprised her was not the elegant wedding invitation he handed her, but the look in his eyes, a wordless plea, as if he was apologizing before anything had even happened. Maya knew exactly what awaited her, and it was not a simple family celebration. She understood the world Ethan was trying to shield her from, a world where gentle words carried sharper edges than knives, where every dress, every way of holding a wine glass, every name printed on a place card could become a method of sorting people. What she did not know was that the first strike would not come from Sterling Plaza, but through the small phone screen inside her Brooklyn apartment. 3 days before the wedding, while Maya was making a cup of hot tea and reviewing a few architectural model sketches, she loved the thing she used to keep herself grounded and away from the pull of the finance world, a notification appeared. "Olivia Sterling has sent you a friend request." Maya froze for a few seconds, eyes fixed on the screen. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew Olivia had not sent this request to make friends. This was an opening move, the first step in a silent chess match beneath the glittering lights of a multi-million-dollar wedding. Maya accepted, because declining would give Olivia exactly what she wanted, an excuse to label her as someone who did not fit in. Almost immediately a message arrived. The words lit up like drops of honey mixed with metal. "Hi, Maya, it is Olivia. I'm really excited to meet you at the wedding. My family is a little traditional, so I am sending you a few suggestions, so you will not feel out of place." Attached were a series of links. Chanel, Valentino, Oscar de la Renta, even a pure white dress completely wrong for her skin tone, but considered safe fashion among the high society crowd. Maya looked at each link the way someone looks at arrows drawn tight on a bow launched by an archer who never admits to being an attacker. She reread the message once, twice, a third time. Every word was carefully chosen, not a single direct insult, but the entire message was a polished monologue of superiority. "You do not belong in my world, so here is a list to make sure you do not embarrass anyone." Maya exhaled slowly, feeling a familiar weariness slide down her spine, the kind she thought she had left behind when she walked away from the upper class, when she chose to live under the radar, when she became just Maya Rivers in Brooklyn. But the weight of those years still lived somewhere in her body, waiting for a message like this to wake it. With a calm that never broke, even when her heart wanted to tremble, she typed her reply. "Thank you, Olivia. I have my own style, but I will look at your suggestions. I look forward to meeting you at the ceremony. Polite, clear, soft enough not to offend, firm enough to set a boundary." When Ethan arrived at her apartment that evening, she handed him the phone. Maya expected him to be embarrassed or troubled or apologetic for his sister's rudeness. But Ethan's reaction went far beyond anything she imagined. His face flushed red. His throat tightened. He shot to his feet like an electric current had run through him. "She thinks you do not know how to dress." He burst out, his voice shaking with anger. "She thinks you need to be guided, so you do not embarrass the family." Maya opened her mouth to calm him, but he had already turned away, pulling out his phone, dialing Olivia, before she could even touch his arm. "Olivia!" he snapped when she picked up his voice, sharp and fast, the voice of a man who for the first time in his life no longer let politeness restrain him. Maya could hear the high-pitched tone of Olivia on the other end, the sound of someone who always believed she was right. "Do not tell me you were just helping." Ethan said each word like a pointed arrow. "Helping what helping, so my girlfriend will not stand out." "You think she does not know how to wear a dress?" Maya saw his shoulders tighten, his fingers gripping the phone until the knuckles went white. Then he froze his face, turning pale in shock. Whatever Olivia said, Maya could not hear, but she could guess. Something about family reputation standards, not wanting to be embarrassed. Ethan almost growled. "The person embarrassing me is you." The words slammed through the small apartment like a blow against the wall. Olivia screamed something before hanging up. Ethan threw his phone onto the chair, hands on his hips, breathing hard. When he turned back, his eyes were full of apology. "I am sorry, Maya. I did not think she would." "It is not your fault," Maya said, her voice soft but heavy with sadness. Something cracked in that moment. Not between her and Ethan, but between Ethan and the last piece of innocence he had about his family. He loved her, but he still viewed the world of the elite with the eyes of someone raised inside it, a place where rudeness was called standards, where discrimination was called tradition, where words that hurt were wrapped in glossy paper and labeled as good intentions. Maya saw that pain in his eyes, the pain of realizing his family was not the people he always believed them to be. But beneath that pain She also saw a strange new determination, as if he had just discovered the first crack in the walls he had been born behind. Ethan sat beside her, letting out a long breath. "I just want things to be easy for you." Ethan Meyer whispered, "I have never lived an easy life." It was not a complaint. It was a truth Ethan was only beginning to understand. And when he took her hand and held it tight, Maya knew the real storm was still ahead. But for the first time, she did not feel she would be walking into it alone. The night before the wedding, while the Manhattan skyline still blazed outside, like swords of light standing upright against the black sky, Maya stood alone in her small Brooklyn apartment, facing the wardrobe that had followed her through many years. The warm yellow lamp cast its glow across her face, making her deep, calm eyes look like twin lakes hiding an old storm beneath their surface. When she opened the wardrobe, Maya's world, or rather her two worlds, revealed themselves. In the front hung the simple, refined pieces: ash-grey sweaters, knee-length black dresses, a chestnut wool coat. These belonged to the Maya Brooklyn, new quiet, steady modest. A woman no one would ever guess had once walked red carpets or attended the kind of underground investment galas people whispered about for weeks afterward. But deep inside, behind the layers of coats and scarves, were thick cream-colored garment bags, sealed tightly. They were like secret doors to another lifetime, a life Maya had tried to bury, though it still existed in the dark, waiting to be called by name. It took her a long moment before she finally reached for one of the zippers. The sound was soft, but it sliced through the heavy air like a blade. Inside, silk spilled out like compressed moonlight. A couture gown shimmered beneath her fingers. It had been hand-cut by one of the most powerful designers in the world, the very dress that once made a fashion journalist write that Maya Rivers walked into a room like a mystery made flesh. She had worn it to a fundraising gala when Rivers Capital first emerged, and every young founder dreamed of securing her investment. Maya stared at the gown for a long time. In that moment, memories washed back over her. The lights, the cautious admiration in people's eyes, the compliments dipped in ambition, the firm handshakes with no warmth at all. She could almost hear the familiar whisper that followed her everywhere. "Be careful with Rivers. She does not need power, because she is power." The thought made the night behind Maya seem to thicken. A part of her knew that wearing this gown to the Sterling wedding would be the perfect blow in return, walking into their world with the very weapon they worshipped: elegance, dominance, a presence so commanding it made others feel small. Maya understood clearly if she appeared in this gown, Olivia would break instantly. Victoria Sterling would swallow every polished insult she had thrown. Everyone who had looked down on Maya would stand there speechless, not only because they realized they were wrong, but because for the first time they would understand who they were dealing with. The idea was sweet, intoxicating even. But when Maya placed her hand on the thin silk shoulder of the gown, a deep exhaustion swept through her like a sudden cold wind. No, she thought. Not because she was afraid. Not because she wanted to hide forever. But because wearing that gown meant stepping into their game, accepting their rules, their voices, their hierarchy. It meant admitting that her worth could be measured by the fabric on her body. Maya zipped the bag shut. The sound was soft, final, as if she had just closed a door on a past that had hurt her, but had also forged her into who she was now. She turned toward the front of the wardrobe, letting her gaze settle on the dresses, their nameless pieces, but refined down to every stitch. and then she stopped at the simple black dress. No luxury label, no metal logo, no silent claim of status. A soft silhouette that hugged the waist fabric dark enough to catch light, but never show off. A dress only a truly grounded woman would dare to wear in a room where everyone judged by brand names. Maya lifted the dress, the fabric sliding through her fingers like a whisper. Be yourself. And in that moment, she realized nothing in the world made her more beautiful than not trying to prove anything at all. Standing in front of the mirror, the black dress draping gracefully over her shape, Maya was no longer the enigmatic Rivers of the investment world, nor the girlfriend of Ethan under the Sterling family's scrutiny. She was simply Maya, the woman who had rebuilt an entire life through quiet strength. Then her phone vibrated on the table, a message from Ethan. I will pick you up at 8 o'clock. As long as you hold my hand, I will take care of everything else. Maya looked at the screen, her eyes softening with affection. He wanted to protect her, yet he didn't understand that in the world she once lived in, no one could protect her except herself. But she also knew one thing Ethan did not say, those words to be a hero. He said them because he wanted to walk beside her, no matter what happened. Maya set the phone down and touched the screen lightly before letting out a quiet breath. She knew tomorrow would be difficult. There would be scrutinizing eyes, sugar-coated words carrying poison, people who believed they stood above her only because they did not yet know the truth. But she also knew something more important than all of that. Tomorrow, when she stepped into Sterling Plaza with Ethan, she would no longer be hiding from herself. The black dress in her hands was the answer. And that answer carried the silent, unshakable strength of a woman who had never let the world decide her worth. On the afternoon of the wedding, Manhattan wore its most dazzling skin, glass towers reflecting the golden sunset taxis, honking crowds rushing, and in the middle of it all, Ethan Sterling's sleek black car sliced down Fifth Avenue, like an arrow heading straight into the heart of an approaching storm. Maya sat beside him, her fingers gently holding the fabric of the simple black dress she had chosen. It was not a luxury design, yet it made her feel wrapped in a kind of armor woven from confidence. Ethan glanced at her worry in his eyes, but also a warm glow Maya did not want to shatter with any painful truth. When they stepped out in front of Sterling Plaza, the grand hotel partly owned by the Sterling family, the world seemed to shift colors. From Brooklyn's open dusty air, Maya suddenly entered a place where the atmosphere thickened, saturated with expensive perfume, the click of heels against marble soft laughter laced with judgment. Enormous crystal chandeliers, large enough to make anyone feel small, cast sharp rings of light across the ceiling, like hundreds of invisible watching eyes. And just as Maya expected, the real eyes followed almost immediately. From the grand staircase leading to the ceremony hall, two women approached Victoria Sterling Ethan's mother in a navy satin gown and a cold diamond jewelry set. And beside her, Olivia Sterling, the bride of the evening, with a perfectly sculpted face, like an expensive porcelain doll. Victoria's first glance was not toward her son, but a swift half-second sweep over Maya, enough to assess, categorize, and dismiss her from the list of people worthy of a genuine smile. "Ethan, you are late," she said, without once looking at Maya as if Maya were just a shadow trailing him. Olivia was different. She smiled, wide, sweet, but her eyes were as sharp as a freshly honed blade. "Oh, you finally brought your girlfriend." I have been dying to meet you, Maya. She stepped forward and lightly clasped Maya's hand in a polite gesture, but her gaze travelled down Maya's black dress, lingering on every simple detail as if searching for flaws. Simple, very simple, Olivia said, lips curled. Minimalist, but in a brave way. Maya's smile was serene, like the surface of a lake at dusk, but inside every word Olivia uttered hit her like small stones cracking the calm she had spent years building. "Thank you," Maya replied, her voice quiet, but sharp enough that Olivia blinked. But the performance was only beginning. A shrill, older voice, dripping with aristocratic arrogance, drifted from behind Olivia. "Her skin is quite dark, isn't it? Very distinctive." It was Margaret, the Sterling family's cousin, infamous for her innocent remarks, wrapped in noble etiquette, but soaked in prejudice. Olivia pretended to wave it off, acting as if she was protecting Maya from the insult, but in truth making sure everyone nearby heard it. Auntie people love exotic beauty these days. Very unique. A soft ripple of laughter rose from the nearby guests, the kind of laugh people make when they think they are being sophisticated, while completely unaware of their cruelty. Ethan parted his lips to respond, but Maya gently placed a hand on his arm, light yet firm, like a soft rain restraining him with surprising strength. She stepped forward, looking directly at Olivia and Aunt Margaret. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful, in a way that made the ones facing her strangely uncomfortable. "Thank you for the compliment," Maya said, her voice steady and clear, each syllable falling on the marble floor like smooth stones. "I am very proud of where I come from." Olivia and Margaret froze for a few seconds, not out of shame, but because Maya had refused the role they wanted to assign her, the inferior one, the one who needed guidance, the one who knew her place. Instead, Maya stood before them like a mirror reflecting their arrogance so sharply they could not decide whether to look away or keep staring. Her response was not an attack. It was a refusal to participate in their battle, and that made them feel small in a way they had never experienced. Victoria Sterling cast another quick look at Maya this time, her eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to decipher who this woman was. Something about Maya unsettled her, a kind of calm strength she did not often see in outsiders. But instead of asking, she said in a voice cold as stone, "The entrance for guests is not here." A staff member in black immediately stepped forward, bowed and gestured politely for Maya and Ethan to move to the left, where the secondary seating area was arranged, each row placed farther from the altar, according to perceived importance. A separation made to look polite, gentle, discreet, yet unmistakably clear. Maya understood. Ethan understood. Everyone understood. They were being placed outside the family's inner circle, a silent humiliation disguised as hospitality. As Maya sat in the last row, she felt Ethan still holding her hand tightly, but the pressure in his grip was no longer fear of her being hurt. It was deep disappointment in his family. "I am sorry," Ethan whispered. Maya turned to him, her eyes soft yet steady, as though she were the one comforting him instead of the other way around. "It is not your fault," she murmured. But inside, Maya felt something she did not dare say out loud. Here in the air, heavy with judgment, Ethan, even though he loved her, could not protect her from the silent power his family wielded effortlessly. And in that moment, Maya understood something with absolute clarity. She was stepping onto a battlefield Ethan had never seen, but she had lived through her entire life. And tonight, her greatest battle had not yet begun. Soft music drifted from the string quartet near the altar, delicate violin notes pouring a carefully curated luxury into the air. Yet to Maya, every sound felt like adding another invisible layer of pressure across her chest. From the very last row, the place reserved for those who did not belong. She looked toward the front, the brightest spot in the hall, where the wedding of Manhattan's two most powerful families was unfolding like a modern royal ritual. Everything was perfect to the point of lifelessness, flowers arranged like art installations, guests dressed in outfits glamorous enough for magazine covers, and everyone smiling the kind of upper-class smile that never reached their eyes. But that perfection only existed to hide the truth, because behind the shimmer lay a suffocating atmosphere filled with quiet judgment, every glance slicing through Maya like a blade. Ethan sat beside her, his back straight, as a drawn bowstring, his eyes scanning the room as though searching for visible danger. But the danger here was not physical. It came from looks, from half-whispered words, from the subtle tilt of a chin when eyes landed on Maya's simple black dress. No one said a thing, but Maya understood every small gesture. It was the answer to a question she never asked, the silent confirmation that they believed she was beneath the carpet they walked on. And the coldest part of all was that they thought this belief was completely reasonable. When the quartet shifted into the main melody, the entire room rose to its feet. The grand doors behind them opened. Olivia Sterling entered. Radiant smile, pristine white gown, each step performed with a precision that looked heavily rehearsed, back straight chin, lifted victory gleaming in her eyes. Maya watched her not with envy or resentment, but with a kind of detachment, like an anthropologist studying the ritual of an unfamiliar tribe. But someone was not able to maintain that composure. Daniel Hayes, the groom. He stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, yet instead of looking at his bride the way any groom would, his gaze drifted. Not absent-mindedly, not nervously, but like a man searching for an escape from his own life. When Olivia reached halfway down the aisle, Daniel looked at his watch. Not once, twice. Each time more tense, more weighted. Maya noticed it instinctively, not because she cared about Daniel, but because that look reminded her of men she had met in the startup world, the eyes of someone hiding a truth far larger than they were ready to admit. Daniel continued scanning the crowd, his eyes moving rapidly, as if trying to identify something. And then the moment Maya could never have prepared for, his gaze landed on her, not passing over. Not a fleeting glance. It stopped. His eyes widened, his head tilted slightly like a man seeing a face from the past he believed he would never encounter again. Maya startled for an instant. She looked back politely, offering a small nod, hoping it would break the strange connection. But Daniel did not look away. His stare sharpened like a blade. Ethan saw it and immediately tensed his hands, curling into fists. "Why is he looking at you like that?" He whispered, his voice tight with alarm. Maya did not answer, because she did not know either. The ceremony continued as if nothing was wrong. Guests sat down. The officiant began speaking in a practiced ceremonial tone. Olivia squeezed Daniel's hand gently, but he did not squeeze back. Her smile faltered for a second, brief enough for Maya to catch, but too quick for anyone else to notice. Then it was time for the vows. Olivia went first. Her voice rang out like stage lighting, bright, polished, thoroughly rehearsed. Guests smiled and nodded in approval. Then Daniel. He inhaled deeply, opened his mouth. "I, Daniel." But he did not continue. His throat tightened. He looked at Olivia, and then his eyes drifted again, away from the bride, away from the altar, and back to Maya, as if pulled by instinct. No blinking, no hesitation, no confusion. It was the gaze of a man who had just recognized a truth blinding in its clarity. Maya felt a chill run down her spine, not from fear, but from comprehension. She knew that look. It was the look of someone who had just connected two pieces of a puzzle that had been separated for years. No one in the room understood what was happening. Except Maya. Olivia leaned closer, gritting her teeth. "Daniel, keep reading." Daniel did not look at her. He kept looking at Maya, and then, with a voice breaking like something long suppressed, he said, "I," and stopped. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A woman pressed a hand to her chest. Someone murmured, "What is going on?" Victoria Sterling scowled, furious, as if Daniel disrupting the wedding of her family was an unforgivable offense. Ethan leaned toward Maya. "Are you okay?" She nodded softly. But in her heart, she felt the storm forming at the very center of the room, the one she had tried to avoid her entire life. Finally, Daniel took a long breath, released Olivia's hand once more, and stepped down from the altar. Under the collective shock of hundreds of guests, he walked straight toward Maya, as if nothing else existed, as if she were the only destination in the gold-plated room. And in that moment, between the fractured wedding music and the rising panic about to erupt, Maya understood one thing. Her life was about to turn in a direction she had spent years trying to escape. But fate never asks permission. It only chooses a moment. And today, it had chosen this wedding. The air inside Sterling Plaza seemed to freeze the moment Daniel Hayes walked straight down the aisle, leaving the bride stranded on the altar, with a smile cracking like plaster under the force of an earthquake. Everyone turned as one, a wave of movement so perfectly synchronized, it was almost frightening, every gaze pulled toward him by a gravity no one could resist. Maya sat still, her hand tightening slightly on the edge of her seat, while Ethan shot to his feet, placing himself protectively in front of her. His voice low and taut like a steel wire. "Daniel, what in the world are you doing?" But Daniel did not hear him. His eyes shone with shock, with notes of realization, bursting open a kind of recognition that made Maya's scalp prickle. He stopped right in front of her, not at the polite distance expected at a wedding, but close enough that Maya could see the faint tremble at the corner of his mouth. "It is you," Daniel breathed like a man crossing a desert and finally finding water. "It is you, Maya Rivers." Maya felt her heart pulled tight by an invisible string. His voice continued, shattering the silence around them like breaking glass. "I used to think that name was just a coincidence." Ethan snapped his head toward Maya, but she could not bring herself to look back. Daniel lifted his chin, voice trembling, but carrying through the hall like a crack splitting open the ground. "Yes, Mom. It was an invisible explosion, a knife slicing through still water, a lightning strike across a cloudless sky." The string quartet nearly dropped their bows. Guests closed their fans. Some pressed hands to their chests. Victoria Sterling shot upward from her seat, her face drained of every hint of color. Olivia, the last remnant of pride still clinging to her porcelain perfection, stood frozen like a cracked statue. Daniel bowed, truly bowed to Maya in the middle of his own wedding. "Boss," he whispered again, as if he could not believe his own voice. "Oh my God," someone behind gasped. "No way, Rivers Capital. No, there is no way it is her." Maya felt as if she were being torn in two. Half of her wanted to stand up and run out of this room before it collapsed under the weight of the truth. The other half wanted time to stop, just so she could breathe. Daniel pressed on his voice, now carrying a reverence sharp enough to shake the room. You are the one who saved my company. You answered my email when no one else even opened it. You invested in the project when every other fund turned their backs. The murmurs erupted like sparks catching flame. Rivers Capital, the most mysterious fund in the tech world. No one knows what the founder looks like. Dear God, it is her. Ethan heard it all and he froze. It was as if every part of him had been flipped upside down in a single heartbeat. He looked at Maya not with simple shock, but with the collapse of countless assumptions rearranging themselves as he tried to rediscover the true shape of the woman he loved. Daniel spoke like a man taking an oath. If not for you, I would have gone bankrupt, lost everything, and I would not have this day. The last sentence twisted itself like a blade and cut through the glossy surface of the wedding. This day, Maya thought, is exactly what you are about to lose. Olivia threw her bouquet onto the floor and stormed toward Daniel, screaming so loudly the microphones trembled. Are you insane? She is just my brother's girlfriend. What are you doing? Daniel turned to her, and for the first time that entire evening, a real expression broke across his face, cold, firm, and disgusted. Is that what you think? He asked, his voice shaking with anger. You think she is just someone's girlfriend, he pointed at Maya. That woman built the future for hundreds of my employees. She believed in me when no one else dared to. Olivia burst into tears like a wind-up doll whose gears had snapped. Why she screamed. Why would you humiliate me in front of everyone? Daniel looked at her, and his answer plunged the hall into another layer of stunned silence. I am not humiliating you. You humiliated yourself when you belittled the only person in this room powerful enough to erase you from this world with a single nod. Maya felt every eye in the room crash onto her like a sandstorm. Those who once looked at her with pity, as if she were a poor girl out of place, now stared at her like a meteor that had slammed into their universe and shattered the social order they worshipped. Ethan placed his hand on her shoulder, but this time his hand was trembling, not from anger, but from realization. He finally understood what Maya had spent so long hiding. She was not someone who needed his protection. She was someone the entire room needed to fear. Victoria Sterling stepped forward now, forcing a genteel smile onto her rigid face. She extended a hand toward Maya, her voice sweet as syrup, but murky as mud. Maya, dear, oh goodness, why did you not tell me this is all a misunderstanding? Maya turned her head and looked at her with a calmness so sharp it was almost frightening. There is no misunderstanding. Her voice was low, steady, but more cutting than any insult the Sterling family had ever wielded. The way you and your daughter treated me before you knew my name, that is who you are. Not a misunderstanding. Not a mistake. A shiver rippled through the crowd. The only thing that changed, Maya continued, is that now everyone realizes you were disrespectful to the wrong person. Olivia screamed, Daniel stepped back. Victoria went silent, and Ethan looked at Maya as though seeing the true depth of her for the first time, not her power, but her sense of dignity. No amount of wealth could buy or bend. A hollow emptiness spread through Maya's chest. She did not belong here, not in this room, not in these stairs, not in this glittering collapse. She turned to Ethan and whispered, "Let's go." Ethan did not ask why. He did not look back at his family. He took Maya's hand, held it firmly, and this time nothing about his grip trembled. They walked away, leaving behind a room crumbling like an empire, exposed under its own hypocrisy. And behind them, amidst the sobbing and the frantic murmurs, one truth was spreading like wildfire. Maya Rivers was not the woman they dismissed. She was the one they would all have to bow to. The doors of Sterling Plaza closed behind them with a deep, heavy thud, like stone collapsing at the mouth of a cave after an earthquake. The fresh night air rushed into Maya's lungs, pushing out the artificial suffocating atmosphere she had just escaped. Ethan still held her hand, gripping it so tightly it felt as though he feared that if he loosened even for a second, Maya would slip into the shadows of the city. The chaos behind them, Olivia's hysterical crying, Victoria's furious shouting, the guests' frantic murmurs faded as they moved farther from the glittering steps. All that remained were the sounds of Manhattan traffic and Ethan's uneven breathing. Maya slid into the back seat as Ethan opened the car door for her, and when the door closed, the world seemed to fall into silence, leaving only the two of them suspended in a private space, caught between two realities, the one they had just left and the one they had no idea how to enter next. Ethan started the engine, and the car surged forward, as if trying to flee Sterling Plaza, before the weight of his family's expectations could chase them down. But no matter how fast they went, Maya could not shake the dull ache spreading through her chest, not from shame, not from regret, but from witnessing a truth she had hoped Ethan would never have to face. Inside the car, only the engine noise, the faint hiss of the brakes, and the slashes of streetlight across the window remained. Maya stared outside, seeing her own reflection, fading in and out, of the glass half light, half shadow, just like the two lives she had always lived in tension. Ethan glanced at her several times, then finally, unable to bear the silence, pulled the car to the side of the road, turned on the hazard lights, and switched off the engine. The yellow glow of the street lamp cast sharp lines across his face, revealing tension and guilt in their rawest form. Not guilt for his family, but for realizing he had failed at the one thing he believed he could do: protect Maya. Maya, he said her name, with a fractured voice, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, who just realized the ground beneath him was sand. Maya turned toward him, waiting. Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes red, as if he had walked through a storm. "I'm sorry." The words were not empty, not obligatory. They were the words of a man crushed by truth. "I'm sorry," he repeated softer, shaking slightly as if blaming himself. "Not because you didn't tell me who you are. I have no right to demand that. Not because you hid anything, not because you stayed silent, but because his voice cracked, because I was naive." Maya opened her mouth, but Ethan raised a hand, gently, asking her to let him finish. "I thought that if I loved you enough, if I stood beside you, my family wouldn't hurt you. I thought my presence would make them behave. I thought I could shield you from the looks, the words, the things I used to think were just personality." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "I treated their cruelty as pettiness. But you saw them as weapons." His eyes locked with hers, and Maya realized the most important thing was not that he apologized for his family. It was that he finally understood the world she had run from. "I didn't protect you," he whispered. "I didn't see what you've seen your whole life. I brought you straight into a storm you feared most without even knowing it." For the first time, Maya saw Ethan not as the confident billionaire who always held his life firmly in his hands, but as a man trembling, and in that trembling she saw his truest self, unmasked, unguarded, unfiltered. "Ethan," she said softly, None of this is your fault." But Ethan shook his head firmly. "It is. Because I didn't understand you. Because I didn't see the exhaustion you carry. You've lived in silence for years, protecting your own peace. And I," his grip tightened around the steering wheel, "I shattered that peace without even knowing it." Maya studied him for a long moment, seeing a deep crack forming inside him. Not a crack that destroyed, but one that opened a door for him to become someone better. She exhaled slow and steady, and for the first time since everything happened, she spoke with honesty, untouched by fear. "Do you know why I left that world? After my parents died, I stopped being a person. I became a name, a number, an opportunity. People didn't look at me. They looked at River's capital. They looked at what I could do for them. Every greeting had a price. Every handshake was a transaction." Ethan swallowed hard, absorbing every word as if it were a weight landing in his chest. "I didn't know who was real anymore, who saw me and who only saw a walking check." Lights passed across her face, revealing exhaustion she could no longer hide. River's capital became a wall between me and the world. When I met you, I thought, if you knew who I was, you would see me the same way everyone else did. So I kept it secret, not to deceive you, but to protect the one thing in my life I didn't want to lose the truth between us. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, as if her words struck directly at his heart. Maya turned to him, her voice soft yet sure. "At Willow and Ink, I could be myself, a woman who likes black coffee, who reads until she forgets the time, who loves quiet. I was afraid that if you knew, you wouldn't see that Maya anymore." A tear slipped from the corner of Ethan's eye, one he could not hide fast enough. He took her hand gently and placed it over his chest. "Maya," he said, breath trembling, "I love you. Not River's capital, not your power, not your name." He pressed her hand more firmly to his heartbeat. "I love the woman sitting across from me in that little cafe. The woman who looked at me as a man, not a walking bank account. The woman who made me feel peace for the first time in my noisy life." In that moment, Maya felt a small crack open in the wall that had guarded her heart for years, not because of his words alone, but because of how he said them. Without defense, without ego, without begging for forgiveness, only truth. Ethan reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair along her cheek. "And I promise," he whispered, "if the world ever tries to take you from me, I will stand between you and it. Not to protect you, but to protect the life we've started building together." Maya closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his touch reach the place she once believed was permanently cold. In that moment, between the sound of passing cars, the glow of the street lights, and the shaky breath of the man beside her, she knew that no matter how difficult the road ahead might be for the first time in years, she would not be walking it alone. As the car merged slowly into Manhattan's night traffic, skyscrapers cast their reflections over the rain-glossed streets, and Maya felt as if the entire city were compressing itself into a thin line where her old world and her new one collided. Tonight, every secret had been exposed, every mask had fallen, and in that rawness, she not only saw herself clearly, she saw Ethan, the man caught between the love he had for her and the family that had shaped him his entire life. Ethan drove slower than usual, as though he needed time to breathe through wounds still stinging. The streetlights carved soft shadows across his face, sanding down the sharp, commanding lines of a tech billionaire, until he looked weary, vulnerable, and painfully human. Ethan Sterling, who had always walked through grand rooms where every gaze was drawn to him, who could shift the direction of a conversation with a single word, no longer looked like the sterling heir. Tonight he was a man watching the foundation of his family crumble under values he no longer recognized. For the first time, he understood what Maya had lived with for years, being judged, being underestimated, being dismissed. And something in the breaking made him deeper. "We need to talk about this," Ethan finally said, his voice low and sanded by exhaustion. "About my mother, about Olivia, about what they said, and about me." Maya turned to him, her eyes soft but seeing everything. "Ethan, I don't want you to fight your family because of me." He let out a short, humorless breath of laughter. "No, Maya. I'm fighting because of me." He shook his head, as if trying to collect pieces of himself scattered across the night. "Tonight, when my mother spoke to you like that, when Olivia looked at you like that, I realized something I've been avoiding my whole life. They weren't just insulting you." He paused, voice slowing. "They were insulting me." Maya blinked in surprise. Ethan looked at her with a steady, quiet conviction. "Because the way they treated you showed how little they respect the values I believe in. I was naive enough to think I could exist in both worlds, hold on to you, and still stay in that family." But tonight he inhaled deeply. "I realized the truth. If that world needs to step on you in order to keep standing, then I don't belong in it anymore." The words were not loud, but they hit the air with the weight of falling stones, shaking everything around them. But Ethan wasn't finished. He lifted his phone, and though his hand didn't tremble, his breath did. "Do you trust me?" he asked softly. Maya nodded. "I do." Ethan pressed the call button. "Mother." Victoria answered almost instantly, as if she had been waiting or panicking or both. "Ethan." "Where are you? Do you know what just happened? You let that girl Ethan cut her off," his voice, sharp and precise as a blade. "You will not call her that girl again." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, her heart tightening. Victoria went silent, then shifted into her usual commanding tone. "You must bring her back. We need to explain things. Olivia is Mother Ethan," said, cutting her off again, this time lower, firmer. "There will be no bringing Maya back. There will be no explanations, no damage control." Ethan Sterling Victoria snapped. "You are letting your feelings control. You have let prejudice control your entire life." Ethan replied, his words hardening into steel. "I refuse to let it control mine." Maya watched him in the dim glow of the streetlight and saw the tension ripple across his jaw. "I will say this once," Ethan continued. "Either you and Olivia offer a real apology, clear, sincere, public, not to win Maya's approval, but because you were wrong." Or his silence stretched long enough to bend time. "You will no longer be part of my life." Victoria's breath caught. "Ethan, you cannot, I can," he said, "and I will." Then he hung up. He did not wait for outrage. He did not wait for tears. He did not wait for bargaining. He simply ended the call clean and final, like closing the door to a house whose rotten foundation he had finally seen for what it was. The silence in the car was no longer heavy. It was the silence of someone who had just set down a burden they had carried their entire life. Ethan turned to Maya, his eyes still red. But in that redness was light, the kind of light found only in someone who had stepped out of his own cage. "I choose you," he said. "Not because you're River's capital, not because you hold power. I choose you because I love you, and because I choose myself too, the version of me that will not bow to a standard built on arrogance." Maya lifted a hand and touched his cheek gently, like placing a promise rather than a comfort. Ethan. Her voice trembled. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. Ethan smiled a soft smile, but one that resonated like a quiet triumph. You didn't make me lose anything. You helped me see what I should never have held on to. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Family is supposed to be where love is, not where prejudice lives. The car rolled forward again, this time not towards the Upper East Side or Sterling Plaza, but toward Brooklyn, toward Willow and Ink, the place where he first saw her real smile, the place where he first saw himself clearly. When they stepped inside the cafe, the small bell chimed like a sigh of relief. The scent of roasted coffee, old books, and warm light wrapped around them like an embrace. Maya sank into the familiar armchair. Ethan sat across from her. No secrets between them. No worlds dividing them. Just Maya and Ethan, equal honest, no armor, left to hide their wounds or their strength. In that moment, Maya understood. Truth can be brutal, but love with enough courage can stand after every collapse. And tonight, they had chosen to stand for each other. Night stretched on as if someone were holding it in place, refusing to let it pass. Yet inside Willow and Ink time moved slowly and gently, like a steady breath. The warm golden lights reflected off Maya and Ethan's faces, creating two small halos enough to push away the Manhattan cold enough to make all the chaos they had survived feel distant, like a nightmare dissolving with morning light. Maya sat in her familiar armchair, her fingers gliding across the worn fabric, the same spot where she had spent hundreds of mornings hiding from the world she feared would swallow her whole. But tonight, she was not hiding. Tonight, she was facing the truth of her own life, and the man sitting across from her had witnessed all of it. Her fear, her strength, the past she concealed just to live as an ordinary human being. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, as if holding on to something fragile inside him. But when his eyes found Maya, the look he gave her was no longer shaky like when he confronted his mother, nor filled with guilt like when he realized he had failed to protect her. His gaze now carried the certainty of a man who had already chosen his path, and the person he chose to walk beside him was not his family, not the Sterling name, but Maya Rivers, the woman he loved, before he ever knew who she really was. Maya Ethan began, but she lifted a hand, gently, signaling for him to wait. She took a slow, steady breath. She had to say this first. Tonight everything broke apart in a way I never wanted, she said, her voice, low but resolute, like the sound of a door opening after years of being locked. I didn't want Daniel to recognize me. I didn't want anyone to know I'm River's capital. I didn't want to become the center of a storm. I only wanted... She paused, searching for the right word. I only wanted peace. Ethan nodded slowly, each nod carrying an unspoken apology. Maya held his gaze, her dark eyes deep like a lake, after a heavy rain reflecting her own truth back at her. But then I realized something she continued. Peace is not running away. Peace is not hiding from a world just because it once hurt me. Peace is having someone who will stand with me, even when the whole room stands against me. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to reach for her hand, but he waited. Maya's voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from opening the most guarded part of her heart. Ethan, when I sat in that last row of the wedding, when Olivia looked at me like a stain that needed covering, when Aunt Margaret spoke about my skin like I was some strange object, I thought I would have to walk alone again. She swallowed gently. But then you stood in front of me. You stopped Daniel. You faced your family. You chose me." Ethan let out a breath, as if he had been holding it for 1,000 years, waiting to hear those words. Maya smiled, a small but bright curve of light on still water. For the first time, I felt like I didn't have to protect myself anymore. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, his palm wrapping around hers, warm and real. "I will always stand beside you," he murmured, his voice like a vow that needed no witness. "Not to shield you, Maya, but to remind you that you are not alone. You were never meant to stand alone. You only thought you had to." Maya's smile softened. "So what will you do about your family now?" Ethan leaned back in his seat, exhaling long and deep, like someone dismantling an old wall brick by brick. "I won't abandon them," he said, honestly. "But I won't let them into my life unless they come with respect. And they definitely won't be allowed into your life unless they learn how to see you differently." Maya nodded. "Ethan, I don't want to pull you away from your family." "You didn't," he replied, his voice firm and warm. "They chose their place, and I chose mine, and I choose to stand with you." That feeling, the feeling of being chosen, not for benefit, not for status, but for herself, filled Maya so deeply she wanted to cry. But she kept the tears inside, letting them shine quietly in her heart. Outside the city hummed unchanged, but inside the little cafe the world of Maya and Ethan had been rewritten. Maya looked around at the old bookshelves, the faded paintings, the armchair she once called her hiding place. But it was no longer a refuge. It had become a beginning. Ethan looked at her as if he realized the same truth at the exact same moment. "Maya," he said gently, "I don't know what the future will look like. I don't know how my mother will react. I don't know what Olivia will do." He squeezed her hand softly. "But I know one thing for certain. I want to build that future with you." Maya tilted her head slightly, her eyes glowing like twin streaks of light. Together, Ethan's smile lit the entire room. Together. Right where we started. And on the terms we choose. Maya leaned back into the armchair, her breath steadying her heart, opening in places she thought she had sealed forever. In the warm gold glow of willow and ink, surrounded by the smell of coffee and the faint clink of a spoon, in a cup somewhere behind them, she knew she no longer had to walk as a shadow. For the first time in years, Maya Rivers felt peace, not because she hid her truth, but because she was seen, because she was chosen, because she was loved. And from that moment on, the future was no longer a burden she had to outrun. It became the road she and Ethan would walk side by side, steady and strong, unafraid of any gilded ballroom or critical stare belonging to no world but the one they chose to build. A world that began in a small cafe and would grow in whatever direction their courage allowed their love to reach. From the perspective of an expert in organizational culture and power dynamics, the story of Maya and Ethan is a powerful reminder that true elegance is never defined by diamonds, designer gowns, or prestigious lineage. It is defined by how people choose to treat one another when they have no idea who the other person truly is. The incident at the Sterling Plaza wedding did more than expose the prejudice of a wealthy family. It revealed the most enduring value in any relationship, the choice we make every single day, the respect shown in silence, and the courage to stand on the side of what is right, even when it means standing against an entire room. Power is not measured by assets, but by one's ability to uphold dignity, even when facing disrespect. If this story prompts you to reflect on the real worth of a person, like the video to spread the message. Subscribe to follow the next journeys, where truth is never hidden, and before you go, comment the 3 words, "Hold your dignity."